You know what? If it's not working, just flip it upside down. It is Thursday, and if you know anything about the Shadowlands, you know that this is like Christmas Day every single week. A whole new bunch of changes come into the game to Blizzard trying to figure out exactly how to get this thing ready. Of course, the game was supposed to come out in just a few days, but that's not happening, and Blizzard is still really struggling to get a lot of the stuff working. Even something as basic as leveling is still bugged, as you can see here, where we tried to test out the brand new leveling experience curve today, yet it just kicked me out, decided I was not part of a covenant, moved me up to the level 60 area, and wouldn't let me back in. In fact, it turned out that I had been level gated, prevented from continuing my leveling experience until I had hit certain levels in Bastion. Yet all this stuff is due to be worked out. Now, many people have speculated on the forums that perhaps Blizzard is being a little lazy, or they're not going to utilize this time well, and that is just not true. And we have seen them make some big sweeping changes just today. Last week, they buffed a lot of the legendaries to make them a little bit more interesting, a little bit more desirable, and today, they just took the Soulbinds and just went whoosh, and swapped them around. Now, this led to a lot of panic mode from a lot of people as to, haven't we been iterating on this since like the early beta? And the answer is yes. Blizzard have been working on trying to get the Soulbinds somewhat balanced across all the covenants so that one covenant wasn't just the way to go for such a long time now that there was definitely a fear that by just flipping them around and shifting things around, they might have screwed them up again. Yet, that's not what I'm seeing, actually. Actually, I'm seeing some quite good stuff here. So what exactly has happened then? Well, Blizzard probably realized the same thing that they realized with Legendaries just a couple of weeks ago. Over the last few months, Blizzard has been slowly degrading, or scaling back, might be a better way of saying it, the effectiveness of all the new systems in the Shadowlands. Now, no doubt that's because of balancing concerns. If they make things too strong, then they've locked some players away from getting those things. That leads to all kinds of problems down the line. So they've just been slowly sort of degrading things back. And we've seen evidence of that in the Covenant abilities, in the Soulbinds, in the Conduits, and of course in the Legendaries. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we went too far. We went too far. These things are no longer that desirable. People are losing interest in these systems that we've spent months and months working on. We need to make them better. We need to up them a little bit. So they did that with the Legos. And then they took another look at the Soulbinds. Now, the Soulbinds were one of the heaviest hits out of all of the systems in the Shadowlands because they launched in a iffy state. I got to see an early preview of these before the beta came out, yet once we saw them, we were like, oh no, these things are a bit wacky. You're just giving like 10% burst, 20% critical strike, all these things that really skew how certain classes in the game work. And you can't just throw these things out there and expect everything to be okay. So they took them down a bit, and then they looked at them probably last week or a couple of weeks ago and went, these are really boring now. In fact, one of the bigger issues is that they are supposed to be like an artifact weapon or a talent tree, meaning that the end goal should get better. You start off with something decent, then it gets better as you grind out more renown, which is the currency needed to unlock more Soulbind stuff. And then as you get high towards the end of the tree into the final big ultimate point, everything should be pretty cool up until there. But that's not what was happening. In fact, some of the really interesting stuff was actually at the very, very bottom of the tree. You were getting that first. And the stuff that was left at the top of the tree was super, super boring. And in many cases, utterly pointless. Some things like durability loss on armor is slightly reduced. You have a chance for earning Hearthstone reduction. Things like that people would go, I just want to get to the last point. That's all I want to do. So this doesn't work because it runs into the same problem that people had with artifact weapons. Or should I say, Blizzard had with artifact weapons. With artifact weapons, we scaled through that tree and we made sure to get the best things as soon as possible, meaning that the big grind, the long grind towards the end, was for the less interesting stuff. And that's not the way any of this should work. So they flipped them over. They flipped them over. So they didn't really add anything new. In some cases, they decided to shift what was actually turning out to be the more important spell and make that the best spell. Because we, as people testing this stuff, can clearly see that the tier 3 ability is way better and more interesting than anything else in the tree. So they shifted that up into being the main ability. Not only that, the main ability, such as Bron, the big robot that can be summoned by Forge Light Mechanicos, that is now your first ability. This is a really cool change. So now when you get your Soulbind, no matter your lowest renown, you will get the big hitter of that tree. Then, the new interesting things that you used to get first, which were typically something to do with your Covenant ability, so it could be Door of Shadows, disorientates things, turning it into a Spectral Fox will heal you for a little bit. They then made them tier 2. So you've got a really good starting ability, or you are getting now, then you're getting your travel abilities, then they put in the boring abilities, like right in the middle. This durability and all that kind of stuff now falls in the middle of the Soulbinds, and then after that are then very interesting, yet not quite as interesting as the main ability. The reasonably interesting stuff is now towards the end, or at the very, very end. These are still cool things. These are things like chance to gain a lot of haste. They're basically trinket procs. Versatility moving around. Things like that that are good. They are important. They're not super overwhelming, but they're certainly not dull. They're certainly not utterly pointless like a lot of things were originally. So, good change. This is actually remarkable. I was surprised to see how well they've worked this out. In fact, by scanning through several of the trees, the abilities you would have picked up if you would have gone, say, the Biss route, as we knew it at the time, if you would have done that all the way to the end, you would actually still travel the same path now. Even though they've flipped upside down, even though they've moved some things around, they're essentially identical. It's more a case of the order you unlock them and the prize waiting for you at certain points, which I'm all for. I think this is totally fine. I'm really happy with it. Although it has brought up one issue that Blizzard already fixed, and they haven't fixed it this time. Now, the optimist in me says that's just because they've done this rather quickly. They've just rejigged stuff and they've thrown it back in. And that is when you get your potency conduits. So if you're not aware, they recently reduced the amount of potency conduits. These are the ones that straight up just increase your damage, increase your healing, things like that. These are what most people would consider to be the important ones, because they're going to directly affect your performance of your character, especially if you're a DPS or a healer, and a tank to that extent. They moved them all so they were all within the same banding, because people like myself pointed out that, hey, unlocking Renown, which unlocks the tiers of your Soulbinds, is wildly different. So if you unlock a potency slot at, say, tier 2, you get that relatively quickly. But if the next one is down at, like, tier 8, that's actually months and months of grinding, like 2 or 3 months worth of grinding in order to get that extra 5% damage. Because the conduits, not particularly interesting, but they are strong. They are in themselves strong. So people were looking at this going, you know what? I'm not going to get this 5% damage bonus, even if I grind every single possible thing I can get every single week, until like way, way, way after the raid is launched, way after the arena season is launched. That kind of sucks. I would rather just have this flat damage bonus earlier, like my friend does. So if I choose Venthyr, I have to wait several weeks longer just to get this kind of arbitrary damage buff, compared to my friend who chose Kyrian. He just got it straight away. So Blizzard did address that. They recognized it was a problem, as many people were looking at this going, well, if my Covenant ability is only slightly worse, numerically, of course, this is min-maxer type stuff, but my Covenant doesn't get like 5% extra damage for months, then I will go with the slightly worse one to get the conduit earlier. That would make more sense, rather than take what might be my Biss Covenant ability, but I don't get this extra conduit bonus until well after it would be useful to me as a character. Now, obviously that varies wildly amongst players, but that was something Blizzard came in and they addressed. Now, with the flipping of the trees, they seem to have missed that part out, which has left some people a little scared, because once again, we are back in that scenario where certain covenants are going to get this big bonus a couple of months earlier than other covenants, and the problem resurfaces itself that was already solved. Now, again, optimistically, I think this is just something they missed out on this time, and they're probably going to address it, because it is a problem for a lot of people who are interested in getting into raiding, getting into PvP, doing all those things. When that new content launches, they like to go in, be fully prepared, and they don't want to feel hamstrung unnecessarily just because of where a little symbol appears in the talent tree. So I do believe this is going to come out. But overall, how cool is this? We're seeing Blizzard make dramatic changes, even at this point. What that means for the Shadowlands release, I don't know, because as I pointed out at the beginning of the video, even leveling is still scuffed right now. So there's a long way to go. There are bugs absolutely everywhere. We're encountering them on maybe every 10 minutes. There's some sort of new bug that we haven't seen before that is still occurring from months ago. They have a long way to go to get this right, but they're clearly willing to make important, drastic decisions on how these systems work. And I, for one, I'm happy. After checking through it, I was pretty delighted to see this come out. And exactly what their intention was to make the Soulbinds more interesting, because you're going to get your big, heavy-hitting ability nice and early. Doesn't matter. You don't need to grind it out. You don't need to start mathing it out as to where to go. And if they move the conduits back to basically what they were last week, then everything should be fine, I think. Fingers crossed, anyway. Thank you so much for listening, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.